arterial blood pressure and pulse pressure. Now they got some crazy problems, mathematical problems to figure this stuff out. Obviously mean arterial pressure, MAP, and you're going to hear this, but just remember what it is, not how to figure it out. I don't think I've ever been in a clinical setting where I've actually had to figure this out. The machines will do it for you, okay, but you don't have to. But it's good to know what it is. So mean arterial pressure, MAP, is diastolic pressure plus 1/3 pulse pressure. Well, pulse pressure is the difference between systolic and diastolic. Okay, so the difference between the two, all right, and then diastolic plus 1/3 of that. Okay, so it's an odd mathematical problem, but the reason why they do it is because mean pressure, when you hear about mean pressure or MAP, they're going to talk about that because it's a constant pressure. And they're going to talk about it not only for the rest of this chapter, but they're going to talk about it in urinary. So try to get used to the what it means. Okay, abnormal blood pressure. Well, normal pressure is 120/80. Hypertension, 140 and above. A hypotension, abnormally low blood pressure. Notice there's really no number for that. Okay, indications of hypotension. Well, there's only one thing, for the most part, and that's blood loss that'll cause hypotension. All right, if you have hypotension and everything's good with you, that's a good sign. That's a sign of a nice, relaxing, non-stressful life. All right? So elastic rebound, arterial walls, they stretch during systole. Well, yeah, you think about it. How about this? You take a balloon, boom. You let the air out, right back down to the same side. Well, it's talking about the same thing when blood flows through them. So rebound, recoil of the original shape during diastole. So contraction, stretch, diastole, relax. That's interesting, because isn't that what we're supposed to say when we see those? Blood moving during diastole. Vasomotion, another good word for it. It's moving even during relaxation. Now it does do this. Okay, so contract, relax. Contract, relax. So it's pulsing. Okay, but it's always moving. It never really comes to a complete stop. Pressures in small arteries and arterioles, well, pressure and distance, MAP, and pulse pressure decreases with distance from the heart. Think about it for a second. The best way to think about this is this. You have a flat stretch of sidewalk. It's perfectly smooth, it's flat, everything is good to go. You take a toy car. You take that toy car and you push it. That toy car, from the strength of your hand, is going to roll. But it's only going to roll so far and then it's going to stop, right? What caused it to stop? Friction. What they're saying here is that the heart is going to give you that main pressure you need, which is your arm pushing the car. But because there's friction, even though it's a flat, perfectly flat surface, there's still friction, okay? And it's going to slow it down. Now that old, how did I say this? It's actually, I don't think it's a law, but it's a theory. Things in motion tend to stay in motion unless acted upon by a force. Right? So everybody's heard that before? Okay, the force there is the concrete. The force in your body is the vessel. And the vessels progressively get smaller, so resistance goes up, friction goes up. Okay? So no matter what our pressure is going out, it's going to slow it down through resistance. Now, where do we take a blood pressure? On which arm? On the left. Why the left? Because it's closer to the heart. So, less distance, less resistance, it gives us a nice number. Okay, now our normal number, which we could back up to, is 120. And we're going to get a decent number right here. Here's your heart. Super close. We'll lose a little bit if we go on the right arm. You can do a right arm, but we prefer to do the left. Okay, so there you go. Notice your systolic. Notice your mean, 100. Okay? And then your diastolic. Diastolic's a little high right there. That's okay. But watch what happens. Pow! We pop out. Here's our elastic arteries. So what happens? These are solid, these are elastic. We bounce up a bit, don't we? Yeah, and then we start to decrease. Notice that arterioles to capillaries, a massive drop off of pressure right here. So from arterioles to capillaries, a huge drop off, and that's because you're going from a solid hose to a leaky hose. Okay? So solid to solid, you're going to retain some of the pressure. But solid to leaky, it's going to drop off and it's done. Venous pressure and venous return, well, determines the amount of blood arriving at the right atrium each minute. Low effective pressure in venous system. So they're basically, bad way to word it, low pressure period. Okay, that's the best way. You just scratch that out and say this. It is low pressure period in venous return. Now there is pressure there, but it's low. And any pressure that's generated is generated by skeletal muscle and the lungs. The lungs is going to help us return because it's going to build up pressure. All right, and skeletal muscle is going to squeeze on the veins and return the blood. Now, venous pressure and venous return, low venous resistance, obviously because, and this was something you guys should have studied, large diameter lumen. The lumen's huge, okay? Muscular compression of the peripheral veins, that's going to help bring it back, and then respiratory pump. And I keep mentioning this, so now you guys actually get to hear how it occurs. So thoracic cavity action, inhaling decreases thoracic pressure, exhaling rises thoracic pressure. And we're going to learn about that when we get to the lungs. But think about this. Each time you take a breath, you're moving blood. So when you run, how many times do you take a breath? A lot. Louise is like, too much. Yeah, a lot. And if you're breathing a lot, okay, high pressure, low pressure, high pressure, low pressure, high pressure, low pressure, high pressure. Pump, 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 pump. Skeletal muscle, squeeze, 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 squeeze. So really, when you're exercising and everything increases, there's really not a loss. There's not a loss. It's actually the same as if you were resting. Everything has equally increased all the way across the board. So it's not like, okay, I need more blood because my heart's beating faster, but there's not enough coming in. There is enough coming in. Thoracic, respiratory pump is pushing it, and skeletal muscle squeezing. Any questions on this part? It's a really cool concept if you think about it, because if you have to exercise, your heart increases, your respiratory rate increases, okay, your muscles, skeletal muscles squeeze harder. Yeah, so there's really not a difference between rest and exercising. You're still getting the same amount, just at a higher volume, just a faster rate. Go ahead.
So why would you get like tired from it? Just the extra energy that goes into it?
Okay, so first off, your body's not used to it. Okay, so you're using up energy that you normally wouldn't use up. Okay, the next thing is your body's not proficient. So when I say that, as you exercise, your muscles actually become proficient at using oxygen. So if you increase all this oxygen and your muscles are proficient, it's not that taxing. Right now, your muscles are lazy. I mean, that's all we have to say. They're lazy. You start running 5 miles every day, that changes the idea. Then your muscles aren't lazy. They're very proficient. Just like you guys in studying right now. Okay? When you first came into this class, you were big wads of cookie dough. Now you guys are styling. You're becoming proficient. The more you use it, the better it gets. Louisa.
I was gonna say, like, whenever I run all the time, like, why is my fist that hurts? Like, it's like painful. Like, it stops me from running.
Okay. You're supposed to run through that. Okay. It's normal.
I still do, yeah.
It's a change in movement of blood. Could also be the muscles not used to it, so they're cramping. Oh yeah.
Really?
In your side. Oh yeah.
So breathing technique.
Breathing technique's always good. Okay. Why is that good? You're counting. It's rhythmic. Instead of yeah, that doesn't work. And then you stop. Oh, your lung comes out. You're like, oh, I'll try it again. Okay, so respiratory pump works really well, but it has to actually work. It has to be proficient. You have to use it. Okay, the less you use it, the more complacent your parts become. Your lungs, your muscles, everything. Capillary pressure and capillary exchange. Now this is huge. Vital to homeostasis. Moves material across the capillary wall by diffusion, filtration, and reabsorption. Okay? Diffusion, filtration, and reabsorption. Diffusion, movement of ions or molecules from a higher concentration to a lower concentration along the concentration gradient. Now, if you guys don't know that, there's something going on, because I've been mentioning that since 241, since 242. Yeah, Bio 160 mentioned it. How? Let's see. Water, ions, small molecules such as glucose diffuse between adjacent endothelial cells or through fenestrated, oh my goodness gracious me, fenestrated, how about those fenestrated capillaries? Okay, some ions diffuse through the channels in the plasma membrane. Okay, large water-soluble compounds pass through fenestrations. Lipids and lipid-soluble materials such as O2 and CO2 diffuse through the endothelial plasma membranes, and then plasma proteins cross endothelial lining in sinusoids. It's pretty big. Now, not the biggest ones, but some of them do pass through that. But if you remember right, sinusoids were pretty leaky. Okay? Filtration. Well, this is the big one, driven by hydrostatic pressure. Hydrostatic pressure. When we have time, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. We're going to have to get almost all these slides done today. Okay, so here we go. Here we go. Okay, on the arterial side, on the artery side, right? I did it in red. Arterioles. So what are these called? Venules. What is this in the middle? Yeah. Okay? So what they're talking about, filtration, hydrostatic, water, hydrostatic, constant pressure. That means that there is pressure. Okay? Is there a lot of pressure over here?
No.
No, it's very low. Okay, so let's come back over here and put high to low pressure. Hydrostatic pressure is constant pressure, and because we have constant pressure here, guess what happens? Fluid, proteins, lipids, ions, they get pushed out. O2 gets pushed out. It gets pushed out. We have pressure. Now, because we don't have any pressure over here, right? And everything is out high and high, guess what happens? The inside becomes low. Now, watch this. Green. Protein. That means there's a colloid in there. And what is the most abundant protein found in plasma? Albumin. 60% albumin. So now we have a colloid in here. And because we need to go from a greater concentration to a lesser, so we had more pressure in here, so it went out. Now we have low pressure, so what's it going to do? And there you go. So hydrostatic pressure pushes everything out. It's high pressure. It pushes it out. Is this like the new style of passing notes? Is that how that works?
No, I told you to take a picture.
Oh, take a picture, make sure I'm out of the way, jeez. This, costs extra money for this in the picture, so, no. Colloid osmotic pressure, colloid osmotic pressure. So guess what's gonna happen? Colloid, the protein's gonna pull everything back. We're going from higher concentrations to lower concentrations. So when we start out, we push out because it's high pressure, but then we need to pull it back in, so guess what's going to happen? Colloid osmotic is going to pull it back in. Colloid osmotic pressure is going to pull it back in. Now notice I haven't gone over any of these slides yet. Well, because this is the best way to do it right here. Because now you know what's happening. Here is our arterioles. We have pressure here. That pressure has enough ability to push everything out from a greater to a lesser. Now this becomes a greater, and so what do? We pull it back in. We actually suck it back in with colloid osmotic pressure. Because we're going from highers to lowers. Always. So in here, hydrostatic pressure pushes it out. In here, colloid osmotic pressure draws it back in. Pulls it back in. Okay? And that's at the capillary. Well, don't we need to move nutrients and waste across the capillary? Yeah. Now, if there's leftovers, the lymphatic system will pick it up. If there's leftover fluid, if there's leftover anything, the lymphatic system's going to pick it up. Okay? So we're going to do this. We're going to push out and then draw back in. And if there's anything left over, fluid, how about pathogens? Isn't the lymphatic system part of the immune system? Yeah, it's going to pull those back in. Okay, so let's see what this says. It says filtration driven by a hydrostatic pressure. There we go. Water and small solutes are forced through the capillary wall, leaving larger solutes, albumin, inside. Now there's an equation for this. We have a big number here, then we push a portion of that out, leaving a little number in here, because that little number is smaller than the outside number. It's going to draw it back in. So if you use numbers to equate higher concentrations to lesser concentrations, it works out really well. There's always going to be a little bit of fluid in there. So reabsorption, the result of osmotic pressure, blood colloid osmotic pressure, okay, equals pressure required to prevent osmosis caused by suspended blood proteins. Okay, recall point. What is the most abundant protein, and why is osmosis so important? By the way, all those recall points, I put those in before this class started, 4 months ago? Just to refresh your guys' memory. This is not part of the company's PowerPoints. I put those in there. So if you haven't figured that out, every time it says a recall point, that's me saying, hey, remember back to what we were doing. And I couldn't think of any other way to say it. Recall sounded good, right? Okay. What is the most abundant albumin, and why is it so important? Well, in this case, we have to draw it back in. We have to draw it back in. Does it equalize it out? Yeah, I mean, the numbers change a little bit, but it does equalize it out. So they're using filtration, hydrostatic pressure, reabsorption, colloid osmotic pressure. And they give you a little bit of a nifty little image here. You can kind of match that up to what I just did here. It's good to see the arterioles and the venules so you understand what's going on. Go for it. Let me get out of the way. I'll leave it up there. You guys can take pictures of it, after class is over or right now. However. Capillary hydrostatic pressure. Notice we have amino acids, we have blood proteins. Okay? We have glucose, we have ions. There's the interstitial, okay? And they blow it up a little bit. So there's hydrogen and there's water molecules, and guess what we're doing? We're pushing them out. We're pushing them out. Hydrostatic pressure is pushing them out. Okay? Interplay between filtration and reabsorption ensures that plasma and interstitial fluid are in constant communication and mutual exchange. Well, it has to be mutual because, check this out. CO2, O2. Amino acids, can I read your note? Okay, then I'll read it anyways. What does it say? There's no wait list in New York. Nice prioritization here. Nice. I dig that. Let's put that right there. Okay. Guess what? There's no wait list in New York. See that red feeling in your face?
You're not red.
Yeah, you're getting red.
No.
You are. You're getting red for her.
I'm gonna get red.
So, filtration and reabsorption. Filtration and reabsorption. Why is this so important? Well, we have to equalize everything else. So what did I say about gases? How do we equal that out? Huh? We let gases out? Where? Our butt? That's one way to equalize. Because if we didn't, we'd blow up like balloons and float away. Okay. Please try to pay attention. Okay? CO2 and O2, there's an exchange. Obviously, cellular respiration is going to produce CO2. We have O2 found in the bloodstream. We have to have that communication and mutual exchange. The dropping off of O2 and the picking up of CO2. The dropping off of nutrients, the picking up of waste. All right? Obviously, water, not a bad byproduct, but it's a byproduct of cellular respiration, and so we're going to have excessive water. And so what do? If we don't bring it back in, the lymphatics will pick it up. Okay? We're always going to have a little bit of excess water in the interstitial fluid. And if you don't believe me, get a job where you're on your feet for 8, 9 hours a day. At the end of the day, when you take your shoes off, are your feet the same size they were when you started the day? No, there's a lot of swelling going on. That's called edema. Okay? That's excessive water. That excessive water throughout the night will get picked back up, and in the morning, what do you have to do? Pee.
What happened with the high blood pressure and don't retain liquids and the swelling?
Well, it depends on if we're talking about high blood pressure against the kidney or just high blood pressure in the body.
With the kidney?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay? So, accelerates the distribution of nutrients, hormones, dissolved gas throughout the tissue. Now, dissolved gas is one of those ones, if we don't need it, we're not going to get rid of it. If we need it, we're going to get rid of it. Okay? So if the front row is exercising a lot, but the rest of you are not, we're going to move most of the gas over here. Okay? It's where you need it. Same with nutrients. Now, interplay will assist in transport, has a flushing action that carries bacterial toxins and other chemical stimuli to the lymphatic tissue. So there's our lymphatics right there. Okay, so if we're pushing things out, don't you think that the pathogens are going to get pushed out? And they're going to get picked up by lymphatics. Lymphatics, the lymph nodes are actually our surveillance spot. We'll actually survey for foreign pathogens. Now, net hydrostatic pressure forces water out of solution. Net osmotic pressure forces water into solution. Both control filtration and reabsorption, and this is what it looks like right here. Okay? Now, factors that contribute to net hydrostatic pressure, obviously pressure. Okay, in this case, it is pressure. So capillary hydrostatic pressure, interstitial fluid hydrostatic pressure. Net capillary pressure tends to push water and solutes out of the capillary. So back to my image. Net hydrostatic pressure pushes out. Colloid osmotic pressure does what? Pulls it back in. Net capillary colloid osmotic pressure is the difference between blood colloid osmotic pressure and interstitial fluid colloid osmotic pressure. Pulls water and solutes into the capillary. So now, not only do we have a great image of what's happening here, but we have a definition of what's occurring here. Okay? So there is a wonderful mathematical problem for this, which I'm not going to have you guys actually have to learn. Just understand that there's a difference between hydrostatic pressure and osmotic pressure. Hydrostatic pressure is going to push it out. Osmotic pressure is going to pull it back in. There's always going to be a set number. There will be a set number that literally goes from this point to this point. So it's almost like we're just trimming off the top here and then pulling back in over here. Alrighty? Capillary exchange. At the arterial end of the capillary, fluid moves out. At the venous end of the capillary, fluid moves in. Now that's just a lot of repetition, so you know it's going to be a couple test questions, if not half the test, on what occurs in a capillary. Transition point between filtration and reabsorption is closer to venous end than arterial end. Excessive fluid ends up where? Excessive fluid ends up where? The lymphatic vessels will pick up the excessive fluid. Okay? Oh, that looks interesting. Okay? So, whether you use this image or you use my image, okay, make sure you overlay the notes from what we just talked about between both, because they both give great explanations. Do I have any questions? Questions, questions, questions. All right. Now, capillary dynamics, well, hemorrhaging. I don't know if dynamics is a good word. Dehydration. So what they're talking about is actual homeostatic imbalances here. Hemorrhaging, that's an imbalance. Dehydration, that's an imbalance. So that's all they're doing. Okay, tissue perfusion, on the other hand, is not an imbalance. It's something that we talk about all the time. Blood flows through the tissue, carries O2 and nutrients to the tissue, which is what we're talking about here. CO2 and waste away is affected by cardiac output, peripheral resistance, and blood pressure. How much, how much, how much, how much? Okay, are we dilated? Is the heart pumping? Do we have high or low pressures here? Okay, that's what they're talking about. How much do we have to get it out there? Now, cardiovascular regulation changes blood flow to a specific area, and I've already talked to you guys about this. At an appropriate time, in the right area, without changing blood pressure and blood flow to vital organs. So we'll keep stuff going to vital organs, but guess what? I just found out that row 4 needed more oxygen. So I'm going to close you off, I'm going to close you off, I'm going to close you off, I'm going to open you up. Okay, the heart, the lungs, everything still gets what it needs, but I'm going to divert it over here so you guys get a little bit more. So it is literally saying it will change to get it to where it needs to go. Now, what are the biggest changes, and the ones I've used all the time during lecture? Eating and exercising. And if you think like that, you're good to go. Because when you eat, all the blood goes to your stomach. When you exercise, it goes to your legs. Any questions about this? Any questions about this? You surviving, Louisa? Okay. How do we control it? Well, auto-regulation. okay, causes immediate localized homeostatic or homeostatic adjustments. Neural mechanisms, well, we can actually cause changes by slowing and speeding up the heart. And then endocrine. This is long term. So you might as well say endocrine / kidneys. In fact, might as well, you better. Long-term regulation of anything in the body is controlled by the kidneys. Short-term regulation is controlled by the nervous system, right here, right now. If you need long-term regulation, the kidneys are going to take over. Now, auto-regulation walks you through homeostasis, normal blood pressure, volume, homeostasis disrupted, okay, inadequate local blood pressure or blood flow. There's what we're going to do. So, do you guys remember this comment? If you have high blood pressure, what does your heart want to do? Meaning, it wants to slow down. If you have high blood pressure, it wants to slow down. What do your blood vessels want to do? Dilate. If you have low blood pressure, Ellen, what does your heart want to do? It wants to speed up. What do your blood vessels want to do? Constrict. Auto-regulation. It's immediate. It's right now. Okay? Right there, activation of cardiovascular centers. It's all neurologically controlled. Okay? Auto-regulation. So, local vasodilators. Low O2 or CO2, low pH, nitric oxide. Nitric oxide, what does that do? What does NO do? Lucy? It's a natural vasodilator found in our bodies. Natural vasodilator. So, local vasodilators. Local vasoconstrictors. Okay? Precapillary sphincters. Can we slow things down by that? Yeah. So, cardiovascular centers. Now, this is the last slide we'll do today, but let me point something out. Cardiovascular centers. Cardioacceleratory centers increase. Cardioinhibitory centers decrease. So, what did we just talk about? I called on Mimi, I called on Ellen, Lucy. If you have high blood pressure, your heart rate wants to do what? Slow down. Your blood vessels want to dilate. If you have low blood pressure, your heart wants to do what? Speed up. Your vessels want to constrict. We're just changing it. We're flipping it over to switch back. It's here and now and it's immediate. Can it last over a long period of time? No. So for long-term regulation, what do? Kidneys.